For a lot of us out there, we have forgotten that we have people who love us. We often think that the people who are beside us all the time, they don't say it, but maybe they're a little against us. Or we think, the universe is out to get me, like everything is against me. And what I'm here to say to you today is, welcome to Badass Softy, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and we are in the week of 4th of July. And 4th of July always makes me think of my dad. I grew up in a small town called Independence, so 4th of July was clearly a big deal. And more than that, it was actually a really big deal to my dad. Every year, he would wake up before the sun, and he would take our camping chairs down to Main Street to secure a prime spot under some shade on the parade route. And then after he did that, we were all still asleep. He'd head over to the firehouse where he would start setting up and prepping for the famous fireman's pancake breakfast that pretty much fed the whole town. He loved fireworks. We often worked at a fireworks booth to make extra money for our family. He loved, watching us set them off in the driveway. And he actually was almost always a part of the crew that would go down and set up the whole fireworks show that they would set off, on the 4th of July down on the riverfront. Everybody would see. My dad would set it up and he would light it off. He loved it. And, when I talk about that, the 4th of July and kind of that hometown like parade and everything, in a lot of ways, I look back on those moments and my childhood was pretty idyllic. And I think a lot of even my most favorite memories are from the 4th of July. And, side note, I have to admit that I've gotten older. How some people approach the holiday and patriotism and how they speak about it leaves me with some mixed emotions about the holiday itself. But if I'm most honest, I still love a good 4th of July. Because of my childhood and because of my dad. But to say that everything was always smooth sailing with me and my dad would be a little misleading. Because, a small town or a place where everybody knows your name sounds great as a theme for a bar, but isn't always as fun when you are the closeted oldest son of the pastor of the largest church in this really close-knit community. Because not only was my father a pastor, but he also bowled in the local league. He was a volunteer fireman, served as police chaplain. He prayed with the high school football team before every single game, home or away. My father was very well known, but on top of that, he was also just beloved. Because we said often, he had either married or buried somebody in almost everybody's family in town. He did so many weddings, and if I drove my dad's Suburban through town, I got honks and waves, and a few people would kind of like jokingly bump me when I was at a stop sign, or, I'd be driving down the road and people would pretend to swerve into me, if I'm pulling into a parking lot, just because they thought I was him, that people loved him. My father loomed very large in our small town of about 8,000 people. And if I'm honest, there were times where I resented him for meaning so much and giving so much to our community and feeling like maybe it was at the expense of our family, because I wasn't sure if he noticed me or watched out for me with so many other people he had to care for. Now, I never had a bad relationship with him, but I did often wonder where I fell on his span of vast attentions, because he had a lot of them. There was one time, though, when I was in high school, my friends and I were hanging out at the marketplace parking lot on Main Street late at night, as we did. And my friend Jenny Pointer needed to make it home before curfew. And in her typical kind of like wild ways, as she was leaving the parking lot, she peeled out. And smoke was everywhere, noise was everywhere. We were all laughing. But it turns out that just down the road, a police car had spotted her and turned on their lights and tried to catch her before she got all the way across town to her house. And when I say all the way across town, it was only a couple blocks. So they didn't catch up to her. Now, what you need to know is we knew all the police officers in town by name and reputation. And everybody feared crossing paths with Palmer because you knew if you ran into him, you were going to get busted for something. Because in a town where, the greatest crime you could commit was moving somebody's lawn chair before the 4th of July parade, we had a number of officers who felt like they needed to create action when it wasn't needed. And most of them were older brothers or fathers of people who we went to school with. And it was hard to give the respect deserved while they were in uniforms because we had just been with them at a backyard barbecue. So they often felt the need to demand it kind of by being jerks. And to be honest, Palmer was the worst of them. He once pulled my brother over, lights blazing, siren blaring, and got out of his car with his hand on his gun. Now, the only problem with this scene is that my brother was a freshman in high school and pushing his friend Jesse Rutledge down the street in a shopping cart. That was Palmer. So just as we're about to get into our cars to leave the lot because it was getting close to curfew, we see Palmer turn on his lights and pull into the parking lot. And even though we were all only a few feet away from his car, he used his megaphone to instruct us to stay put. He and his partner then got out and they had returned to question us and ask us about who was driving the car. Of course, we didn't tell, and some of my friends started smarting off, which did not sit well with our interrogators. So they ended up dividing us up into groups to try to get something out of us, but none of us broke. Because getting pulled over by a cop in a small town is nothing compared to being labeled a rat in a small town. And none of us were going to risk that kind of social suicide. Now, Palmer recognized me. And like spotting a weak member of the herd, he approached to pounce on the one with the crippling conscience. So he takes me aside, he separates me from my friends, and began to talk to me in a more friendly, kind of calm tone. And he's like, look, I know who you are. You're a good kid. Just tell me who it was and we will let you guys go. And besides, we already know who it is. We know her car. We just couldn't find it to prove it. And she's not in trouble. She's not in trouble. We just want to talk to her. And I was like shaking, but I did not break. And when my silence confirmed that I wasn't going to cooperate, he began to get a little more aggressive and share with me how he knew that I was the pastor's son. He knew my dad personally, and he shared how much my father would be ashamed of me for not cooperating. And if I didn't tell him who had peeled out, not only would he tell my dad, but he would be giving him a call to wake him up. Because then Pastor Stan Peterson would have to get his oldest son from juvenile hall, because now that they had been questioning us for 15 minutes, it was after curfew, and we were all going to get hauled in. I was terrified. I could either give up my friend and lose all my friends, or risk the wrath of my father and all my friends' parents by going to juvenile hall. I was convinced my father would not only be disappointed in me, but ashamed of me for not doing the right thing. So after a few more minutes of pleading with the officers to let us go, I came up with a plan, and I worked out a deal where I used a payphone to call my friend. Yes, we had payphones back then, and I let the officer talk to her and warn her, give her warning over the phone. It took a couple of times to get her on the phone, but after convincing her to talk to the police to get us off the hook, she agreed, and the officers let us go, and she didn't get a ticket. Now, I never said a word to my dad because I was convinced that officer was right, that my dad would be upset if I didn't help them get my friend. Just kind of hid it. Well, what did I say? Small town. So the next week, our friends, the Andersons, were at our house, and in front of my parents, asked me about the incident because their son had been part of the evening, and they were like laughing at it and talking about Palmer like the whole thing was a no big deal. But the silence that kind of followed clued them into the fact that I had not shared the story with my parents yet. Now, I tried to play it off like it was no big deal, laughing with the Andersons at the absurdity of all of it. But I could tell that my dad was not only shocked, but he was upset. And he didn't say much, not in front of the guests, but he just kind of nodded to me and basically said, "It's okay, go upstairs." So even though actually he never mentioned the incident again, I kept waiting for the hammer to drop. For days, I lived in fear that I was going to get punished. So I'd constructed these arguments and speeches in my head, going over them again and again, trying to find out just the right combination that would justify why I had shamed my father twice. Once in front of the police and once in front of his friends. And my tone in my fake arguments ranged from angry to apologetic. But mostly I thought through different ways I could bargain my way out of punishment. But the conversation never came. I found out later from my mom that his silence that evening when he found out was not a result of his anger against me, but against those who would use him against me. The day after that dinner with the Andersons, he had gone down to the station and cornered those officers, chewing them out for pitting us against each other. He told them in very specific terms never to do it again. My mom wasn't sure what the exact threats were, but a man with my father's influence in a small town can make life very difficult for police officers who already were not well liked. Guess what? I never had a problem with Palmer again. When I was younger, as a little kid, I really did always feel like my dad and I were on the same side. We played together. We fought against the bad guys together, but when I got a bit older, there were times where I felt like that changed for me, where sometimes we were maybe on the opposite side, that he was almost against me. I knew he loved me and I knew he would protect me. I knew he would provide for me. But that moment when I heard that he yelled at the cops for me is when I was reminded that he would fight for me too. I'd forgotten we were on the same side. And while there were moments I didn't often show it as a weird teenager, I actually never doubted it again. And that knowledge that my dad would always be there for me might be the single thing that helped me accomplish so much in my life. Because every time I got ready to take a scary leap, like when I chose to go to California to college or live in a tent outside of the slums of Tijuana to help build homes for the disadvantaged, or sell my house and tour as an improv comedian, or even quit my job so I could come out of the closet without causing a huge scandal, I knew one thing. I could always go home. Now, what's funny is my parents didn't always love the fact that I would use that in explanations, because I would say things like, in front of them, I might say, I may lose my house and my car and everything, but worst case scenario, I can always live with my parents. They didn't take offense because they assumed that just because I assumed I could move home. They took offense because I was calling them my worst case scenario. But it's true. No matter what, I knew that my dad, my parents were always there for me, and that was the greatest gift they ever gave me. And the funny thing is, they didn't give me that gift by holding on too tightly. They gave it to me by creating a home I could leave, I could venture out from. And when I look back on my life, there's a lot of decisions that didn't make much sense on paper, like moving to California or living in a tent or touring as a comedian, quitting my job. I've spent a lot of my life walking towards things that scared me. But maybe that's because I never really believed that I was walking alone. Somewhere in the back of my mind was the knowledge that if I fell apart, there was a place for me. Not just a house, a place, people who loved me, people who were there for me. As I've gotten older, I've started to realize that for a lot of people, that's pretty rare. Not rare because people don't love each other. Most people do. More than they know even what to say often. More than they know how to show. But every now and then, when somebody makes it unmistakably clear, when they tell you how much you are loved, when they tell you how much safe you are, they don't always have to say these words, but what they're really saying is, you can go, You can explore. You can risk failure. And no matter what happens, you're still one of us. And for a lot of us out there, we have forgotten that we have people who love us. We often think that the people who are beside us all the time, they don't say it, but maybe they're a little against us. Or we think, the universe is out to get me. Like everything is against me. And what I'm here to say to you today is you have people who love you. You do. The universe is not against you. And because of that, I think that there's an opportunity for you to be able to take some risks you might have been holding back from taking. And the reason I think that it gives you freedom, it gives you independence. And honestly, I know this feels a weird thing to say, but I think that's why I think about my dad a lot around the 4th of July because of the fireworks and the fireman breakfast and all those things, But it's more than that. I grew up in that town called Independence. And independence is often thought of as being self-sufficient, standing on your own, needing less from people. But I'm not so sure. Maybe independence isn't the absence of connection. Maybe independence is what's possible because of connection. Maybe the people who help us become the most free are the people who make us feel the most loved. And if there's one thing I've learned in 50 years, it's that the world is a lot friendlier than it sometimes appears. There are more people on your side than you think. There are more people cheering for you than you realize. My dad gave me that feeling, and I know that I have so many other people when I pause for 5 seconds that give me that feeling too. And when I can think about that, all these years later, it still helps me lean into independence. So before we go, let me leave you with this. May you never underestimate the power of making someone feel safe. May you be the kind of person who reminds others that they are not alone. May you create the kind of safety that gives people the courage to explore, to risk, to grow, and to become. May you remember that you have more people on your side than you can think and more people cheering for you than you realize. And may you discover that true independence isn't found in standing alone, but knowing you are loved. The universe is on your side and you're going to be okay. Because we believe you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.